What if the next supercomputer wasn't made of silicon? What if it was made of living human brain cells? Right now, in real laboratories, scientists are growing neurons in dishes, placing them on computer chips, and teaching them to perform tasks. They've played video games. They've learned from feedback. They've adapted. So the question isn't science fiction anymore. The question is, are we building living computers? Welcome back to Simple Things Why and How, where we break down the biggest ideas shaping our future. For decades, computers have meant the same thing. Silicon chips, circuits, code, electricity switching between zeros and ones. But your brain doesn't use zeros and ones. It uses living cells. About 86 billion neurons, constantly firing electrical and chemical signals, forming patterns, learning, adapting. And now scientists are asking something bold. Instead of copying the brain with artificial intelligence, what if we used real brain cells? And in 2026, that's no longer just a theory. It's happening. A few years ago, researchers grew hundreds of thousands of human neurons in a lab dish. They placed them on a special chip that could both stimulate the cells and read their electrical activity. Then they connected it to a simple video game, Pong. At first, the neurons fired randomly. But over time, something changed. When the system performed better, it received predictable stimulation. When it performed worse, the stimulation became chaotic. And like all biological systems, the neurons began organizing themselves to reduce unpredictability. They improved. They learned to keep the ball in play longer. No programmer wrote strategy code. No AI model was trained on massive datasets. It was just living neurons adapting to feedback. That experiment proved something shocking. Biological cells can compute outside the body. Fast forward to today. In 2026, biological computing has taken a massive leap forward. Companies have now built the first commercial biological computing units, devices that keep living human neurons alive on chips with built-in life support systems. These systems don't just sit there. They form networks. They process input. They produce output. And recently, living neural networks were trained to handle more complex tasks than Pong, including first-person video games and adaptive control challenges used in robotics. Meanwhile, researchers working with something called brain organoids, tiny three-dimensional clusters of human brain cells grown from stem cells, have pushed things even further. These aren't flat layers of neurons. They're miniature brain-like structures. Still tiny, still simple, still nowhere near a real brain, but organized. In 2026, experiments showed these organoids could improve performance on structured tasks when given feedback, similar to reinforcement learning. When the feedback stopped, the performance faded, which tells us something important. These systems can adapt, but they are not independent thinkers. They don't have goals. They don't have awareness. They are responsive biological networks. And that alone is groundbreaking. Traditional artificial intelligence runs on silicon chips. It requires enormous energy, huge datasets, and massive computational power. But your brain? Less than many household light bulbs. It runs on about 20 watts. And yet it can recognize faces instantly, learn from small experiences, and adapt continuously. Biological neurons are incredibly energy efficient. They rewire themselves physically. They don't just adjust numbers in code. They physically strengthen or weaken connections. That's called synaptic plasticity. And it's the foundation of learning. So instead of simulating neurons mathematically, scientists are experimenting with using the real thing, not to replace computers entirely, but to explore hybrid systems, part biological, part digital, machines that combine the stability of silicon with the adaptability of life. Now let's address the uncomfortable question. Is this conscious? Are we creating tiny thinking machines? The answer right now is no. These systems do not have sensory organs, a body, emotional systems, full brain architecture, and self-awareness. They are clusters of cells responding to electrical patterns. There's no evidence they feel anything. But, and this is important, the ethical conversation is already happening. Because as systems become more complex, we need to define boundaries clearly. The scientific community is actively discussing safeguards, oversight, and transparency. Not because we're building sentient robots, but because we're working with living human-derived tissue, and that matters. Here's the deeper truth. This research isn't really about building sci-fi computers. It's about understanding intelligence itself. By studying how neurons compute outside the body, scientists can learn how memory forms, how neurological diseases develop, and how networks organize, why the brain is so efficient. These systems may help test drugs for brain disorders. They may help design more efficient AI. They may reveal principles of learning we still don't understand. The goal isn't to replace human brains. The goal is to learn from them. For thousands of years, we built tools from stone, then metal, then silicon. Now we're exploring whether life itself can become part of our machines, not to dominate it, not to create artificial minds, but to collaborate with biology. And maybe the most fascinating part of all? The same type of cells growing in those dishes are inside your head right now. Thinking, questioning, imagining this future. So are we building living computers? In a way, yes. But what we're really building is a deeper understanding of how intelligence works. If this topic expanded your mind, leave a like so more curious people can discover it. Share it with someone who loves futuristic science. And subscribe to Simple Things Why and How, because the future isn't just being programmed, it's being grown, and it's just getting started.